Asha wants to talk story? Let's talk story. So, there's been a lot of buzz about the Elder Scrolls 6 in recent days, and it all stems from the CEO Asha Sharma making comments about the state of the game during a live playtest that she witnessed over at Bethesda Game Studios. I already made a video on her comments and some of the things that this could mean, but I want to extrapolate a little bit more specifically on the Elder Scrolls 6 story, because while she mentions in her tweet that yes, the size is great, the game is on a large scale, very grandiose, more or less, I'm paraphrasing. She also mentions that the story is greater. So the things that were known about Skyrim at the time of Skyrim's release were with this large, very lived-in world, right? And then there was a story that I would say was relatively well done, especially some of the side content, and then later DLC. And Asha Sharma, CEO of Xbox, is claiming that those things from Skyrim are still true, but in this case, the story is even greater than those other aspects. And that is a bold claim, Asha. So in today's video, I'm going to talk a little bit about speculation as it relates to the story and overall balanced RPG game by Bethesda Game Studios. So sit back, relax, get ready to watch me yap for about 10-15 minutes. And don't forget that by the end of the video, if you have any thoughts at any point, feel free to throw them in the comments because I am more than happy to engage in dialogue with you over what I think versus what you think, and I enjoy having that dialogue and candor. So if you want to do that, do it. Otherwise, let's jump right into the video. So let's get an overall picture about what the Elder Scrolls 6 storyline may be. Now, it's really hard, and it's going to be really hard to dial in on what exactly the story is going to be about, right? Because there's little to no information about the setting of the game, let alone characters and overall story content. But if you look at a lot of the speculation online and other large content creators, you're going to see a lot of common themes. So one of the beautiful things that we now know about the Elder Scrolls 6 is that it is followed by 8 asterisks, as at least as far as it's concerned from Asha's tweet. So those 8 asterisks could be many of things. It could be High Rock, with not an asterisk for a space, because they're trying to throw us off the trail. It could be Sentinel, which is right now the most predominant theory. There was at one time people speculating Aldmeris for the Aldmeri Dominion, the High Elves. And while all of those things are very compelling, I think a lot of people are now leaning towards that Sentinel, and at least the sentiment from what I've seen is towards that Sentinel subtitle. So Elder Scrolls 6, Sentinel. Now this is all speculation, so I'm not going to go out here and tell you that's the name of the game, because this could be off. But if we're looking at what we know from the teaser, which very, very much so look like Hammerfell, High Rock, the Iliac Bay, and then we look at Sentinel, which is also, believe it or not, an Easter egg from Starfield, where if you take the player ID at the beginning of the game and match it up with letters numerically, it actually spells out Sentinel, which is way too significant just to be a coincidence. Now, if you look at all of the Elder Scroll games so far, you have Skyrim, which Skyrim is a province. So the last game was named after the province in which the game took place. You look at Morrowind, the same can be said there. But you look at Oblivion, and Oblivion took place in Cyrodiil, which is not the name of the game. So while Sentinel is a great name, it doesn't necessarily mean that is where this game will take place. Nor does it mean that Aldmeris is actually out of the equation. So a lot of things are up in the air. I'm not going to talk any longer on that, but I mean, feel free to let me know. Let it rip in the comments what you think about that. So moving on to this next piece here, since we don't know exactly where the game takes place, but we have a visual from the teaser, we have a lot of speculation, we can all at least surmise that it takes place in or around the High Rock, Hammerfell, or even Sentinel locations. I mean, I think we're all kind of honed in on that region. And there's a lot of common threads, too, if you look at other things that people have explored, which is Starfield and the ships in Starfield actually being essentially a test run for boats for the Elder Scrolls 6. And I thought that was a very intriguing concept, and it's actually one that I could see being true, is if they invested all this time and effort into making ships, a component in Starfield, why not apply the same to the Iliac Bay and give people naval combat or a ship to actually sail the seas between different provinces? That would make sense. Now, I'm not going to go out here and say that's certainly true, but it would make it much more believable seeing that they did a similar thing with Starfield, giving the ability to fly between planets. And while it wasn't perfectly seamless, it is something that makes you wonder, what's going to be possible considering Starfield was on the Creation 2 engine, and this is now on the Creation 3 engine for Elder Scrolls 6 and Fallout 5. Sounds like they're planning to be developed on Creation 3. So, these things all being said, knowing the setting, knowing some possible thematic components of the game, with overall gameplay mechanics, that can let us kind of understand, at least, that this storyline is going to have something to do with that region. And a lot of things that people speculated early on when they thought it was Hammerfell is sword songs. And there's actually some leaks from a video that I did back in, that was probably October when I made the video of 2025. But the leaks that came out around that time had to do with sword songs as being essentially the shouts of the Elder Scrolls 6. So a special power that gives you abilities with the blade. And if you look into the lore, it's a little bit more in depth than that. And I'm not well versed enough to understand all of that intricacy as it relates to sword singing. But I think it's something nonetheless that if you want to look into, there's merit to believing that that is going to be a component in the game, and that stems from the region of Hammerfell. So there's a lot of different moving parts here, and I think that being said, again, it helps us paint a picture about this story and what it could contain, and at least overall elements that are going to make Elder Scrolls 6 a story worth actually playing. So now I'm going to zoom out because I want to talk about my thoughts on what would make for a good story and some of the elements that I need to make sure that Bethesda Game Studios are really working to implement. Because as those of you who played Starfield will know, there are a lot of hollow storyline characters and content from within that game. And while I personally really enjoyed Starfield, and I've made videos saying as such, there are some things left to be desired when it comes to the story, the writing, and some of the characters and the character depth. Because sometimes motivations seem off. Some of the background around certain characters, it's like, this is kind of just lip service or filler just because they didn't think the character through well enough to give you more. So when you take all of that into consideration, what Bethesda really needs to hone in on for the story and for the characters and actually giving you a sense of, wow, I'm playing an RPG where choices and consequence matters, is giving you characters that have real gravity and seemingly thoughts behind the conversations that you give with them. Because while it looked like on the surface there was a lot of depth to the characters, the main cast of Constellation characters in Starfield, it was really just that. It was the surface. And even when you do these things, there's no real consequence to the conversations or choices you make as it relates to your relationship with those characters. And I think they need to do a better job of balancing, like, hey, if you choose some of these options in these side quests or during the main story, some characters probably aren't going to forgive you so easily for that. And you're either going to have to work extremely hard to gain back their trust, or they may just be characters that say, look, I'm not going to be affiliated with you anymore, and they will no longer join your crew or be your companion. So consequence is really going to be at the core of what we need to see from Elder Scrolls 6 to ensure that the story that we actually play through has true consequence and the gravity of your decisions are heavy. I mean, it makes you think like, wow, okay, I can't just pick willy-nilly because it doesn't matter what I do. It's all going to turn out okay. No, like I'm making a real decision here that's going to influence my relationship with several other characters in the game. And that in itself is a major component that Elder Scrolls 6 needs to get right. And while you didn't see really any of that in Skyrim, at least with Fallout 4, there was a degree of consequence with the factions. You saw this in Oblivion too. Certain faction decisions influenced the companions or would-be friends or allies of other guilds or groups in the game. And that's where I think there was a missed opportunity in Starfield. And again, I think that same thing applies to the Elder Scrolls 6. So it's something that we need to see to ensure that this is really going to be a story worth playing and believing in, because nothing is a slap in the face more than, wow, I'm playing this game. Well, this seems like a super important decision, and you select it, and then 10 minutes later, it really doesn't matter. It has no impact on the world itself or the characters around you. Another item that I really want to discuss as it relates to the story is actually figuring out what factions are actually going to become completely off limits by decisions made throughout the game or through other faction or guild quests. And not only that, but interaction with the world around you. So we've now seen games that the entire atmosphere changes based on how you progress the game or what you do in the game. And that's something that, to a degree we've seen it in Bethesda titles, but nothing so significant that it really feels like you're changing the world around you. Fallout 4, I would say, had the biggest influence, but that's only because all of these settlements were completely controlled by you and your choices and decisions. Who you send, if you put up a recruitment beacon, all those things were very heavily influenced by you, but none of the cities changed, or the characters in the game that weren't in controllable locations. Nothing really ever happened when you made certain decisions in the game. Now, Fallout 3, you saw some choice and consequence, and some things would happen. New Vegas, the same in that game. But again, we need a higher degree of that so that the world around you itself changes with the decisions you're making. And in ways that make sense, right? So if you, for example, join a certain guild, and in one of the quests or missions, there's an invasion by an enemy force, and you engage in battle with them, and you let certain characters die, or you're not proficient enough in combat with them to a point where, like, yeah, these characters are dead and they are gone. There's no characters that go down and they're just bleeding out and they get back up when everything's better. I mean, more characters need to have consequence in this world, to the point where certain shops will close if characters die. We saw this in Skyrim. Okay, we saw that to a degree, but again, we want to see more of it from just other parts of the game. And I think if you understand what I'm saying, at least, it seems childish when there are no consequences to the things that happen around you or while you're playing. This is purely speculation. But I do know that I'm rooting for Bethesda. I know a lot of people, the sentiment is, don't support them. They're a terrible studio. They're ruining all these beautiful franchises and IPs. And while I'll say, hey, it's important to have criticisms, we need to give them the chance to make this a good game. I just hope they're listening and taking feedback from people like myself or other people who have thoughts and have, put these thoughts online or reached out to developers or whatever, so we can at least have the best game that they can possibly give us. And while I did mention in my previous video that I want this game to come out soon, because we have been waiting forever, I don't want them to launch it before they're ready. So if there's a way that they can expedite launching that game, but make sure that it's done when they actually release it, I'll be happy with that. If they can't expedite the game and it needs to bake a little longer, then let it bake. Let them cook, because we need this game to bring Bethesda back, and not only just bring Bethesda back, but keep the Elder Scrolls franchise alive and well, and something that all of us look forward to playing for years and years to come. So again, thank you for being here. If you have any other thoughts, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, well met, travelers.